we had like the conversation, and he was very like relaxed, and it was just like comfortable, like easygoing. And I asked him, could I call him Philly? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And then I got nervous to like even ask him, like to do it out in public. Like people think I'm crazy. And then somebody told me like he was waiting for me to say it, and I did. And I was like, okay, next time I promise I'm gonna do it. And then I did, and people were like, well, I was like, yeah, that's me.
Welcome to our third episode of Gapping Down. I'm Rachel Phillips-Buck, VP for Student Success for Pharos Resources.
And I'm Matt Boisvert, President of Pharos Resources. Rachel, we have a really important topic today.
Yeah, so first of all, we should just have everyone sitting next to each other. See, here's me. So if you see us looking at each other, it's because it's very hard not to talk to someone who's sitting right next to you and just to keep looking at the screen. This is our second session in the month-long theme of sense of belonging. And so we're really excited to be able to talk about this. We talked last week with Anthony Malcurie about sense of belonging and how he experienced that. We're going to be talking in a couple of weeks with Dr. Sherry Woosley about her research on sense of belonging. Today, I'm super happy because we have our guest is a student, a first-generation student who I met a very long time ago. And she told me the other day she feels like she's the crash course for me in first-generation students. So she's going to join us in about 20 minutes. But the topic is really important as we've been thinking about our summit initiative and the things that we're investing in. And so we're spending a whole month on this topic. And Matt, I don't know if you want to say something about why it's an important element for us to be considering.
It is such a clear factor when you think about, I mean, just going back to like the foundational research on retention. So going back with Ku and Tinto and thinking about how students integrate into a campus community and their role in that, but also how they're assessing the whole time whether or not they belong or fit. And so today we have a much better insight into the role of sense of belonging on that outcome of not just a student persisting and retaining from freshman into sophomore year, but all the way through to achieve their goal of graduating with a degree and pursuing a career. And so your community's role in that is really critical. And when I think about it, I'm thinking about, so the main thing with sense of belonging is this a group of people where not only do I fit with them, but I can trust them. Yeah. And trust, as we've talked about with community, the role that has is really key. So if we want to have an outstanding community and great student success, then it really foundationally starts with sense of belonging, that you're reaching out, that you're engaging your students, and they feel like this is a place where I do fit. This is a place where I can see myself being not only, as you said, it's not just place, but the people, and that the outcome, the goal of earning a degree, this is the right place for that as well.
So. Yeah. So I want to dive into that in just a minute, because I think there's a lot of different elements to pick apart when we're talking about sense of belonging. But as I always do, I want to do a State of the Union. So what's happening in higher education?
Yeah.
The first thing, I don't know if you heard about this, Matt, the University of California at Davis is offering $75 to all of their students who will not go on spring break.
Wait a minute. So we're going to pay you to not leave campus.
They're calling it a grant, which makes it like a little more serious, not just we're giving you this money, but you have to apply for the grant. 2,000 students will be selected to receive gift cards out of 39,000 students. So it's a really, I don't quite understand the strategy, because you're not saying to all of your students stay here, you're only limiting it by several.
And would that really keep you from going on spring break, $75?
I mean, if you're an introvert, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have plans, if you did not have spring break plans, it might be the better option.
Yeah, for sure. So I like when people are trying new things.
Incentivizing behavior.
Yeah. And we have a lot of schools that actually have canceled spring break, so I don't think it's really interesting. I'm curious to hear across the board how many of you are not doing spring breaks. I've heard like 1-day wellness days, which schools are doing for students, but not for faculty and staff, which I think is a missed opportunity.
Everybody needs a wellness day.
Everybody is exhausted and needs a wellness day. And Matt, you and I didn't talk about this, but there's a weird thing where like it's been a year and there's something about that that is so exhausting, right? Like as it's going on, you're just thinking like, okay, well, this is another month and we've just got to do what we're doing. And yes, we're tired. But there's something about the marker of a year where you just, I think it's starting to settle in. For a year we've been in crisis and just drained. We're just drained.
Well, I think you really have to recognize that. And if you think about a year ago, so a lot of people, faculty, staff missed out on spring break because they were trying to figure out how do we make a transition. So they didn't really get to do a spring break. And then all summer, our schools were working tirelessly and just staying connected. And here we are now with this spring break that was, for a lot of our schools, canceled.
So there's a lot to say about, I think, what's happening in the profession, but we're tired. Also, I wanted to talk to you about this article. I find it very interesting. Here's what it says. Here's the title. College students again give thumbs up to online learning.
Who wrote this?
That's a good question. So what it says is 70% of students surveyed in the 7th annual Online Education Trends Report done by Best Colleges note that online learning was on par with or better than face-to-face instruction, and more than 90% believe it provides a good return on investment and would recommend it to others.
This is for college level?
Yes.
Okay.
So a couple of things that I want to pick apart there. First of all, the difference between it being on par or better with face-to-face instruction, there's like that conversation, and then there's the conversation about it being a good return on investment and would recommend it to others. And I think those are two very different things, right? Like a good return on investment, I only spent $1,000 and I got this college credit. I don't think someone's going to argue that that's not a good return on your investment, right?
Okay.
But the 70% think it's on par with in-person learning. Here's what's interesting. These are students who opted for online classes, which, as you and I have said, is a completely different population than students who have been taking online classes.
And I'd like to know particular disciplines, like what did nursing students think about that?
Right. That's right. So one of the things they say is the majority of these students who enroll in online have jobs and children to take care of. So 70% of them. Right.
Okay, yeah.
So it's a really interesting comparison because you and I have been saying from the beginning that everything we know about online classes was created for a non-traditional population that's highly engaged, highly motivated, and needs super high flexibility because they have jobs and they have kids.
So online is the best option.
Absolutely. And what happened in March and then in the fall is that you have a bunch of students who are neither highly motivated nor need high levels of flexibility that then signed up to take online classes because they had to. And they're reporting, I think it's like 82% of those students said, this is terrible, my grades have suffered, I haven't done as well as I would have done in an in-person class.
I just don't know how you reconcile that research with what we found out with our student impact survey.
So it is misleading in that it's a totally different population of students. And students who opt for online classes, of course, find them useful for them because that's why they pick them. Students who opt for in-person classes who then get moved to online classes do not find them helpful because that's not what they signed up for, right?
Well, and the other thing I would add to that is we're talking about the academic piece. And when you talk about return on investment, what about the student life, student development experience?
Yeah, because for those non-traditional students, they in general are not looking for that element, right? but our traditional students definitely are.
Yep.
And I think, I mean, even that piece of sense of belonging, if you want to extrapolate it out to that, like for a non-traditional student, their sense of belonging is, I need an education, I need this degree or this certification. Whereas for an 18-year-old, what they're looking for is a really different experience.
Yeah, the weight of place in that outcome versus people and
Yeah.
community.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, a couple more things before Kendra joins us. So there's kind of a state of the union about what's happening on our college campuses, kind of what has happened over the past year. So 76% of college students said their mental health worsened since the pandemic began. I don't think there's any surprise in that. I think probably 76% of people would say something very similar. Let's see. 650,000 is the estimated number of jobs shed by colleges and universities from the pandemic start to the end of 2020. So that's about 13% of the higher education workforce.
So we know, I mean, is that including like work study positions or just like
No,
staff?
I think that's just staff.
Because we have schools that they let go all of their resident life employees because they were no longer.
Yeah. So to your point, 40% of students lost a job, an internship, or an offer of either one due to COVID. So that would be kind of what you're talking about, that you have groups of students who were doing work study, were going to graduate and get a job, or we're going to do an internship, and then they lost that because of COVID. This is interesting. 594%.
That's can't.
I know you think that I'm wrong, but I'm not. 594% increase since 2018-19 of schools who made standardized tests optional for admission. So no one's taking the test and no one's accepting the test.
Yeah, at least for this next incoming class, which is going to make it really difficult to find. So when you're thinking about conditionally admitted students, what are we using to assess students who would have a higher academic difficulty or challenge? And yeah, so 6 times the number of schools that are making it optional. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Okay. A couple of things about attendance. So 22% is the decrease in high school graduates who are going to go straight to college for the fall of 2020. So 22% decreased. And that's to the point of equity gaps and Summit Initiative. It's mostly a drop of low-income students and urban high school students. So not even across all segments of the population. 40,000 international students deferred enrollment for fall 2020, which, you know, in the business of higher education are most likely full-pay students. So that's a hit to the bottom line there. And then also about 560,000 students is the number of undergraduates, the drop enrolled in the fall of 2020. So you have students who deferred, you have international students who didn't come, and then you have students who are just like, I'm not signing up for a kind of mass socially distanced fall.
So if schools weren't focused on student retention before, I really hope they are now. If they're on your campus, part of your community right now, with lower incoming cohorts, you really need to retain them.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and then the last couple of things I have for you are about the bottom line. So $120 billion new expenses incurred and revenue lost by higher education during the pandemic. So it's kind of a combination of like, what did you have to spend new, and then also what was your lost revenue?
Yeah.
And that's compared to the $77 billion that's been provided to higher education institutions in the 3 stimulus rounds. So obviously a little more than half is going to be resolved in that. $24 billion new expenses, including COVID testing, classroom modification, and technology. So that's not lost revenue, that's just more money that you had to spend to be able to bring students back safely.
Right.
And then this one blew my mind. $225 million is the amount of money that the NCAA distributed to its Division I member institutions last June, $225 million. The figure was $375 million less than they planned on giving, because what happened in March?
Yeah.
March Madness was canceled. That's amazing. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, it just, I think it highlights the role of athletics and the financial impact for particularly Division I schools.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, the last article I have to talk about is tribal colleges.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of money going to historically Black institutions, primarily serving, also institutions serving Hispanic populations, and also tribal colleges. I wanted to talk about this Navajo Technical University. It's on the Navajo Reservation in New Mexico and Arizona. Some of the students who attend commute up to 2 hours each way every day to attend class. And so as we're thinking about equity gap,
Yeah.
how the kind of upheaval of higher education has affected a particular population of students more than other populations.
For sure.
This school came up with the Homework Express service, which is where they have a bus that gets all of the homework that a student has to do and takes it to a drop-off point so that the students can come and get the homework, because they don't have internet to be able to download it. So the school's trying to solve the problem of like, how do we get these assignments to these students?
Yeah.
And then later the bus comes back and picks up all of the assignments. They discovered that was still making some students have to walk 2 miles just to get to the pickup point.
Wow.
So can we just talk about upstream thinking? You and I have been talking a lot about this. Like, we've got to solve this problem. So this school just bought drones, and they are going to be droning homework to these students who are 2 miles away from the bus pickup spot so that they can still get their homework. And they said it's only about 12 students, but for those 12 students, them being able to cross the finish line to graduation will make a huge impact on their lives and their families' lives. So I love that so much. Just how do we solve this problem for our students? The other thing I wanted to tell you about this school is that they did a survey that said, do you have access to the internet? Yes or no, please explain. And they had a student who said, I have to drive 15 miles to get on a mesa, and then I have to climb a hill that's a little higher than the mesa in order to get cell service to be able to do my homework. So first of all, not internet, cell service.
Yeah.
And the president of the institution said, what's crazy about this response is that the student said, yes, I have internet access. So it's not, no, I don't have it because I have to drive 50 miles and climb a mountain to get it. It's, yes,
Talk
I
about
do.
grit.
And resilience. And it's what you and I are always saying about the hero of the story is the kid who drives 15 miles and climbs a mountain and says, yes, I can get it done. And our job is to be a good guide and try to give them some access, and just make it easier for them, because it's not going to be easy, right? There's nothing about that that's easy. Could we make it easier for them?
I want that student in my class.
I do.
I want to know him by
too.
name. That would be incredible.
And just thinking about what that student is going to tell his kids, right? About like,
literally
in the snow, I drove 15 miles and climbed a mountain and did my term paper on my cell phone because it was really important. I wanted to accomplish this.
The role, he understands the transformative power of higher education. And I hope that school just continues. This is why the funding that the federal government's providing the schools, and why I'm so excited about the way that they're funding institutions that serve communities like that, is that can really not just change that one student's life, but hopefully provide some upstream thinking and resources that can eliminate all of that struggle and allow the student to focus on the real goal.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's go back to our theme, sense of belonging. I think what I want to start with, I talked last week about my issues when I was in school about sense of belonging. I was a New Yorker who came to a West Texas school, and it just is very obvious to me from the very beginning that I did not belong. And you had a similar experience where you picked a very good mission fit school, but then you were with people who were not particularly mission fit. And so you were like, this is not what I thought I was signing up for. Is that a good summary of?
Yeah, it's a great summary.
Okay.
From my fall freshman semester.
Yeah. So what I want to challenge us to think about and our audience to think about is sense of belonging when you don't have it is like a sore thumb. There's no confusion when you go to a place and you're like, nope, I definitely do not belong here. And what's interesting about that is that any observer or any person who does belong has no idea all of the signs and signals that you're getting that says this is not the right place for me, right?
Yeah.
So I said last week, like I go to the grocery store. I'm from New York, so I don't know why everyone's being so friendly. I really don't understand it. Like I don't know why we're chatting. I go to the grocery store. The woman's like, "How are you, honey?" And I'm like, "How's that your business? I don't understand why. Like, why do you need to know how I am?" Right? And everybody who belongs in West Texas is like, Rachel, what is wrong with you? Because that is a totally normal, I know how to respond to that.
Yeah.
My 9-year-old daughter, who's been raised in West Texas, totally understands how to respond to that. And what it says to me is, this is the wrong place and the wrong people, right? And so how you can identify for somebody who doesn't feel like they belong, how you can identify all of the signs and signals that they're picking up on that are telling them they don't belong, it's almost impossible for you. Really, the only thing to do is to talk to them and say, help me understand the places where you felt a signal that you are not one of us. Does that make sense?
I don't know how else you would be able, how will you learn what the signals are, the things that you have to work on? How do you create a better sense of belonging or hospitality toward students who are coming in from New York?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about you, Rachel, and welcome week. So here's orientation. We want you to be a part of our campus and get involved. And your first experience is everything was designed by extroverts for extroverts.
Yeah.
In a campus where we're going to have the world's largest Twister game. And so,
and also, Matt, I walked into the way that they put us in our groups was they had a gigantic coliseum with all of the peer leaders yelling and screaming and playing loud music, and you had to, with signs, and you had to walk in and try and find your group and then like walk up I still am haunted.
It was not designed for you.
It was not designed for me. So as soon as I walk in and I think I have to do this because I have to find my group, but the truth is I do not belong here. And there's no recovering.
How do you overcome that? Right.
Yeah. So I think about a really great example where we did some work about the personality type of a particular school is an ENFP. So they're all extroverted. They're like, want to be around people and they want to have fun and excitement. And they had a really successful IT school. And so they were planning all of the school, the college was planning all of their welcome week stuff for these ENFP students. And the IT school was like, we're not doing any of that, because if you want these people to not feel like they belong, make them go do your welcome week. We're going to have gaming tournaments, and we're going to have pizza, and we're going to watch sci-fi movies, and we're going to do all of this stuff that say to our people, like, yes, you're in this bigger group that maybe doesn't resonate with you, but we understand you. We understand the kinds of things that you want to do, right? So being able to be really intentional about how you're designing experiences. And again, the only way for you to know that somebody is getting those messages that they don't fit is to talk to them about it.
So I think the diversity of your student leadership is really important.
Yeah.
Because all of those things that you're talking about, how you are able to pick up a kind of that stronger voice and understanding what are those symbols of belonging for your group. What can we do intentionally to have the right activities, the right experience as that. So as Dr. Sherry Woosley always talks about, early experiences matter. And in that first week, I don't know what you decided to do. What I decided to do is to stay in my room until, you know, the flag football tournament started. So I
decided to get straight A's. That's what I decided to do. I was like, I clearly have no social, I will not have a social life at this place. So I'm just going to stay in my dorm and get good grades.
Yeah.
So that worked out for me for a little while.
So being intentional, I mean, when you think about people and place and goal and those three things, so listening to a diverse set of your student leadership will help you with that, understanding that, you know, there are different people on your campus. And if you're only designing things for your, the personality of the overall personality of your campus, you're missing out on a lot of other perspectives. And certainly when we talk about Summit, if you wanted to design a better system for first generation students, let first generation students who have made it to their senior year design it. They're going to give you a lot of insight.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, the other thing I would say just in terms of sense of belonging is not only the environment, but also this idea of language. So there's language that you use that is alienating and confusing. And the truth is, it's for no good reason. I don't know why we don't just call things what they are, other than we know what they mean. So why doesn't everybody know what they mean? But thinking about, you and I did an interview with my mom where she was a first generation college student, and she said she had to declare her major. She ended up being a theater major. So she thought declaring your major was like a big ceremony where you like went to a place, yeah, and like stood on the mountaintop and declared, I am, you know. Yeah. And then she found out, I was like, no, it's just, you just go to the register and like sign a piece of paper. And then majors and minors. And that's just one example of where, in fact, Matt, you and I were visiting at a school with a lot of first generation college students, and we were watching advising appointments. And the level at which those advisors were entering into the conversation, which is like, what major do you want to declare? What's your minor? What's going to be your expertise? Like, do you want to do this? How many hours do you want to take? That level where they assumed these college students knew what they were talking about. Right. And we had to come back and be like, hey, you have to start with a class is 3 hours. Right. It's going to take you this many hours to graduate. You should take about 12 to 18 hours in a semester. You're going to take general courses. You're going to take a couple of those. And then as you move on, you'll get more into your majors classes. That level of explanation where these advisors just assume students knew what they were talking about. And it was really painful to watch because they don't want to declare, I don't belong here. I literally have no idea what you're talking about, right? They don't want to tell you that. But you're alienating them when you have those conversations and they have no idea what you're talking about.
So when I think about sense of belonging, I've talked to you about, so as trust is such a huge part of that, but for me and the way I think about it, our role as the guide is to provide assurance all along the way. So advising appointments is a great example of that, especially for your first generation students, especially for students who've never heard from someone else. This is something you're really great at. And so they don't have both the knowledge, but also self-confidence or security in what they're doing. And your role as guide can be remarkable in providing that assurance if you understand the process. So again, if you're listening to a student who went through that and felt that they were overwhelmed and they felt all of that challenge, if you have a senior and you're listening to them, you can then develop something that's really great in providing assurance. And as we've talked about, just normalizing this challenge, that you're not alone. And so let's just take time and talk about some of these basics, what office hours mean. Here's the role of a registrar. You know, some of the the things that we really take for granted. So I think if we were to do anything to be really intentional with our Summit Initiative kind of student is to say, if nothing else, if we can provide assurance to those students that we know are coming in feeling like they're at a deficit, if we can assure them that I'm on your team and I'm going to work with you, guide you through this, and the outcome is going to, change your life. But I'm along with you in this. I'm going to provide, the guidance and the ropes for you.
So Matt, you and I have talked a lot about this idea of unconditional positive regard, which is a counseling term. It means it doesn't matter what you're doing or what's going on with you. I have unconditional positive regard for you. And I'm definitely on your team and I'm going to help you figure this out. And I think sometimes, especially in positions where you have at a higher education institution where you have some locus of power, right? That you might get confused that your job is to get the money or get them. Hey friends. Get the money or get them registered or get this or get that, instead of saying like, actually my main job is just to say I'm on your team and I'm with you, right? And so that unconditional positive regard I think is so important. We have just been joined by Kendra. Kendra, you're muted. Now you're not.
Can you hear me?
Yes. How
Okay.
are you?
I'm good.
Good to see you.
Hi, Kendra.
You too.
We have been talking about sense of belonging. So I'm going to introduce you and then Matt is going to do some interviewing of you and me.
Okay.
So I always say that Kendra is like my adopted daughter, but she has a lot of people who would say that. She has a lot of people who would claim her because she's so good at collecting people to help her. And so I think we've known each other for longer than I would like to.
10 years? 11 years?
A very long time. So Matt, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, I just want to start off, Kendra, with tell me what you remember about when you first met Rachel.
When I first met Rachel, I was undeclared at ACU.
Funny because you've always wanted to be a nurse, but you decided to come in undeclared.
Yes, true. And I think we were having like a dinner with our like group of people. Yeah, advisor group. And so we were having like ice cream afterwards. And I don't know, I saw Rachel and I was like, I want to go on her line. And I had a friend who definitely was like, that's the longest line. You should not, like, why are we going to that line? And I was like, I don't know. I want to meet that lady. Like, let's go to this line. And so eventually she came with me. And yeah, the rest is.
And the next day, Kendra showed up at my office and I just happened to be sitting out in the atrium. But
Yeah.
she came, and my office was like far away. Like you had to figure out how to get to this building. And then you came up and hung out with me. And then I think you met with me every week for the rest of your college.
Yep.
So that is so interesting, Kendra, because it is not an understatement to say one of the tools that you have always used is make alliances, right? Find people who you trust, who you can say, hey, I need help with this. Will you help me figure this out? And it's such an amazing characteristic to have that you have. I mean, if I were to list all of the resources in terms of people that you have acquired over the years, it's a really mighty army of people who have been committed to you being successful.
That's quite a
That's
skill.
fun. Yeah.
So Kendra, let's back up, and I want to hear about your when you started college. Can we just back up to how? So first of all, who brought you to your school? Did you arrive at the university on your own, or who brought you?
Now, my mom drove me. And I remember I had only visited ACU once before. And I just knew you get on 20 and just drive for 2 to 3 hours. And so she was definitely trusting me with the directions. And we just got in a car and drove down 20 for 2 to 3 hours.
So you're a first generation college student.
Yes.
And you were the first in your fit, like you're the youngest, and you have brothers and sisters, but you were the first to go to college. Is that true?
My brother went on with football. Like he went. I think I was the first one to graduate, but
okay.
Yeah, he went.
And so when you came to school, did you have any idea of like, I should bring these things, or like, this is what it's gonna be like, or any of that?
No, I don't think so. I feel like ACU kind of picked me in a way. I was very much didn't know ACU existed. And my youth minister at the time, she was an ACU alumni. And there was like 3 people in our youth group that was also going to ACU. And I was very much stuck on going to a different school. And I remember she kept being very much like, have you applied to ACU yet? And I was like, no. So I just applied to like, for her to leave me alone, kind of. Just to be like, yes, I applied, like, great. And then they used to have June passport there. And one of the other guys that were from our youth group that was going to the June passport. So I was like, okay, like I heard back from them before I heard back from the other school. And I was like, am I really going to the school I know nothing about? Yeah. And then I went on to June passport and I liked it. And I was like, I heard back after I got back from June passport from the other school. And I was like, no, I think I'm going to go to ACU.
So what was it about the experience where you were like, I feel like I fit here?
I think it was just some of, like, I would have familiar people there. Like some people in my youth group would be there. So I kind of had that resource. People from my church back at home, they also went to ACU. And so they kind of knew like the ground and how to navigate through that.
Yeah, that's really interesting that if you have a couple touch points that you're like, even though there's some kind of unfamiliar stuff, I can go to these people and they're going to help me out. It makes a huge difference, right?
We lost Kendra.
I think she's around.
No.
So Kendra, we were talking about the first week, welcome week, and what our experience was. Anything about the welcome week orientation? When you got there, did you love the Twister?
I do remember that Twister game. That was a really big Twister game. No, I kind of sat back and watched some of it. My friend who I was with during, like, we were in the same group because she was undeclared as well. So we hung out with each other a lot during welcome week. And I was probably just as involved as she was. So if she went through something, I'd be like, okay, let's go. And then if she was more hesitant, I probably was hesitant to do it as well. I tried to participate in some of it, but I also was like nervous and didn't really know what to expect from anything.
But Kendra is an extrovert. And so she, like, in that sense, the campus was really similar to you, right? Like it made sense for you to be able to be around all of these people.
Design.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to transition. So you come from home, you're at ACU. What was your experience when you went to the bean, the cafeteria? What were your thoughts about that transition?
I think welcome week for sure helped because we went to the bean a few times without all the upperclassmen there. So that kind of definitely helped to feel more comfortable going places before people were there. I mean, it was like a cafeteria. Yeah, I wasn't like super out of place.
I was thinking about Kendra. I think if I had to choose, there's like you and me, and then there's education. But then like the fourth thing that we have wrestled with is food. Because when I first met you, you didn't really like food that much. And I love cooking.
and I said to you, like, hey, I'm really sorry. You cannot come over to my house because I'll cook for you. And if you don't like it, and if you spit it out, I can never be your friend again. Like, it will just be too much for me to overcome. And so for the first couple of years, I mean, you were at my house a lot, but I was like, I'll open Chef Boyardee for you, but I am not going to cook. And then when I had my daughter, you guys kind of parallel, like, learn to like different things, right? So I'm like feeding her avocados and you're like, what is that? Okay, I'll try it. Oh, that's really good.
Yeah,
so you
for sure. I was like,
strange thing. Yeah.
I definitely was like, if she can eat it, like I can probably try it.
Yeah.
So we did explore that.
Fun part of the development of just learning to be together and figure out kind of how to manage. So okay, I want to move on to some difficulties for you in college. So there were a couple of times where I was like, so you remember me telling you to go introduce yourself to your faculty member?
Yes, I do.
This is a classic story. Kendra's a freshman and I'm like, hey, I need you to go introduce yourself to all of your faculty members. And she's like, why? And I said, hey, it's really important. I want them to know you. And she said, okay. And so then she went out to her faculty member and she said, I don't really understand how you're ordering your lectures. I cannot follow you. Hi, I'm Kendra, basically. And the faculty was like, well, I follow my outline. And Kendra was like, but you don't, because see, you talked about this, and you talked about this, and you talked about this. And I think the conclusion of that was that she told you were in dress code violation and asked you to leave. Yes. Is that fair?
Great.
Yes.
First impression.
So then Kendra comes back and she's like, I don't know why you wanted me to do that. That was a total train wreck. And I was like, what happened? And then she told me, and I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I should have mentioned the goal was for your faculty to like you. It's not for you to like go and say your class is terrible. It's for you to have a relationship with them. And I remember you were like, that you should have mentioned that. Like, it would have been better for you to tell me that up front, right?
Well, from an assurance standpoint, you kind of failed on that one.
I totally did.
You should have told her the goal.
But that is such a great example of me thinking that I'm giving clear instructions because I understand what you should be doing, and you coming back and being like, you left out half of the instructions, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. So I'm pretty sure we practiced after that. I'm pretty sure I was like, okay, you're going to go meet your other faculty members. Let's practice what that's going to look like and how you're going to be, likable and make friends with them or whatever.
Yes, I remember that for sure. I thought I was using very good words because I was like, hey, like, what's the structure of your class? Because I don't really see it. And I thought it sounded really good. And then you're like, nope.
She was not happy with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. We got it worked out. But also, Kendra, I was thinking about the journey that you've been on where, when you're 18 and you don't feel like you are an expert in you yet. And there's a lot of like letting other people tell you what you should be doing and how you should be doing it and that sort of thing. And then you've had this journey where you have learned self-agency and you've learned how to say like, this is good for me, this is not good for me. But I will remind you that in the beginning, the fact that you did not speak up for yourself caused a lot of difficulty, right? I'm thinking about the class that you almost failed, but you really didn't. You remember?
Yes.
So can you talk about that for just a second?
Yeah, so I guess I've always kind of like, if I didn't do assignments, I just took the penalty for it. And there were some times where I would like do the assignment, but I guess I just didn't turn it in or they didn't ask for it. So I like needed to because they didn't mention it. And this class, I did the assignments and I guess I just hadn't given them to the professor. And they were like, you did not pass this class. And I was like,
it was
no.
a nursing class, right? It's like a fundamental nursing class. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I was like, no, like I did the assignments and something clicked in my brain that was like, you got to fight for this. Like, this isn't the end. And
so what he said to you was, I'm sorry you failed this class. You won't be able to graduate as a nurse. I guess you can go to a community college and become a different kind of nurse, but you're
Yeah.
not going to be able to be successful here. Which, can we just pause for a second and say, that's the fact that he was not trying to be more helpful in retrospect makes me very angry. That it was like, sorry, there's nothing to do. I guess all of your dreams have burned and crashed. And I think that it was a lack of his understanding about how smart and how capable you were, because there's a lot of other solutions besides you can't graduate, you have to go home now, right? So that's weird. But it's only because he was like, everything's crashed and burned, that you were like, wait. I have these assignments, I can show them to you. And he was like, oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, that's great. You passed, basically.
Yeah, that happened. And then the dean of the nursing school too was like, we're going to do something this summer. Like, we're going to make this work. Like, she very much took a chance on me.
Yeah. And she's another one in your army, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, we're going to help Kendra with this. But I think that finding your voice, I think has been really difficult. And it's really funny because, well, before I move on to that, you remember that we had lunch that day and you're like, hey, the teacher told me I failed, but then I found all these assignments. And I was like, Kendra, can we just sit? Like, I'm really happy that it came out okay, but can we just sit here for a minute and live in the space where you actually can't graduate from ACU and are not going to be a nurse, and like have the full weight of that pressed down on us, and let's not ever do that, please. Remember? Because we both were just like, oh my gosh.
It didn't hit me as bad as, it didn't hit me that hard until we had that conversation of like, oh, that really was about to happen to my life. And so,
yeah. And I do think after that, you had a renewed sense of like, hey, this is something that I really want. Like somehow being faced with maybe that's not going to come true. You were like, oh my gosh, this is something that I really want, and I'm going to work really hard to get that. So, but I also would say you have had some people interact with you that were pretty arrogant in terms of they know the best thing for you. They know how you should be responding to a thing. They know how you should be talking about a thing or emotionally processing a thing. And that has caused a lot of conflict with people somehow telling you your response to something is wrong. And you're like, you don't know me actually, right? So can you talk about that a little bit?
yes, you just mean like from the college perspective or just in life?
I mean, I any example that you can give.
Yeah, so I think some of it is, it happened to me in college for sure. And also in like my adult life and my career. I believe that I'm very much one who just takes in the scene, and like I process things differently than some people. I don't always verbalize what I'm processing, but it's happening in my head. And I think sometimes people take that as like, I'm not interested, or like, I don't care about things, which is not the case. It's actually the opposite. I'm like really invested, which is why I'm like quietly trying to take everything in. So I have had to like step up more and have to have to fight for things out loud, because I guess they don't believe that I like am handling things right. If I get stressed, I don't say anything. I just like push through and keep going, where they want to see me like asking for help and verbalizing and doing this. And I'm like, I do that if I need it. But sometimes I just need to like go into myself and like just get the things done without having to complain about it or say anything out loud.
Yeah. And it's a weird thing where it's like, because you're not responding in the way that they think you should be, the conclusion is you're not going to be successful. You can't do this. You're not a good fit. You're not whatever. And you're like, actually, I am successful. I am doing a great job. I do know how to manage myself. Everybody who's around me and knows me loves me. Why is it that you have the right to tell me how I should be processing this thing? Which, Kendra, I've never had anyone do that to me. I've never had anyone say like, well, Rachel, you're responding wrong because you're not this. So it's a really interesting sort of arrogance, I think, when people are busy telling you how you should be responding or doing a thing. And you're like, you actually don't know me. Why are you allowed to decide how I should be doing this, right?
Yes.
So Rachel, I think that fits in as we were talking about the role as a guide and understanding. So there's a difference between normalizing a feeling or something that's happening in a student's life, and trying to kind of take over.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, Kendra and I have known each other for a very long time, so our relationship has evolved to now. She's very, very dear to me. But in the beginning, when I was just trying to be a student development professional, what I was constantly trying to manage was expert, where like I know about higher education and I know about things that are going to help you be successful, but also I'm not your boss and you have a lot of independence. And so, you know, if you're not going to classes, I'm like, that's your choice, but also it's going to be harder for you to graduate, right? As opposed to saying, you must do these things, you have to do these things. I'm not in control of you. I just get to walk alongside of you. And really, I mean, I think the conflict that we have most often is you're like, tell me what to do. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Should I do? I don't know if you should do those things. Like, I want to talk to you about them, but I don't know whether that's the right thing for you to do. Right. So that kind of how we get to share in the experience, I think is part of the reason why it's worked so well for us.
Agreed. I do.
So I want to talk about a kind of a shock factor that happened to you while you're in college. But first, I want to talk about finances. So you remember the end of your freshman semester. Do you remember coming to my office and talking about how are we going to pay for school? Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Basically, you came and it was the end of your first semester and you're like, hey, I spent all of my loan money on this first semester. There was no money. They're asking me to pay for next semester and I have no idea where I'm going to pay. And you probably have a different perspective now. My perspective was, Kendra, this is 1 out of 8 semesters. I could maybe help you solve the problem for next semester, but I cannot help you solve the problem for 7 semesters. Like, and you were like, I mean, I can take out more loans or I can do this. And I said, there's nobody on this campus who can tell you, yes, go get a bunch more money so that you can pay for this. We just cannot endorse that, right? And my feeling at the time was like, you were such a good part of the community. You were working so hard. You were growing so much. It just was such an awful idea that you would only come for 1 semester and then you would have to go home, having had a taste of that community and that growing and all of that. And then to be like, sorry, you can't afford it. I guess you have to go back to whatever, your plan B is. And you had a great family friend, church friend who like worked really hard to help guide you and get you the resources that you needed to be able to be successful, which is another person in your Army who's committed to being helpful. What was that experience like for you?
I honestly was not thinking about the other semesters. I was just thinking about just getting through the next semester. So I didn't even have the other years in my thought process at all. I was like, I just have to make it to next year. I can't go back home and all that stuff. And I remember just talking to a friend about it, and she's basically like my sister now. And I didn't know until later on that she was actually the one that went to her mom and like talked to her mom about it. And then both of them, like Roxanne and Dan, both just, I don't know, they invested in me. Like I couldn't sign up for classes because I was like, I'm not gonna be able to get in my classes if I don't do this, because it was all a fight to get the classes that you wanted. And I remember I couldn't register for classes, and then she came and saw me, and then she was like, okay, go register for classes. And I was like, what did you do? Like, I don't understand what just happened. Like, how can I register for classes now? And she sat down with me and she was like, hey, like, I know that you don't know how to work this financial aid part in school. And she was like, and me and my husband would like to sit and like help you with that part. And I was forever grateful to have her do that.
It makes me want to cry. It's just such what you said is exactly right. It's such an investment, and it is such a vote of confidence. Like, hey, I know you're going to be really successful. We just have to figure out how to get you to a place where you can accomplish, everything you're going to accomplish. So I like that part of the story. It makes me very happy. Okay, the last thing is I was trying to think when the bus accident happened. Was that your junior year?
I believe so.
I think it was 2011.
Yes, 2011 was.
So Kendra, we talk about shock factors as things as you're just going along and everything's going great. It might be someone, my grandfather passed away in my freshman year, and that's a shock factor that I have to deal with. And for you had a really serious shock factor where you were, was it for spring break that you were going?
I think so. I don't actually remember. It was just a trip that they were going on. Was it spring break?
Maybe it was a long weekend, like fall break or something.
Yeah,
like that.
it was in November.
Okay.
Yeah. And you were going to a children's home, or it was a mission trip, right?
Yeah, we were going to a children's home.
So a bunch of people from school were on this bus, and they had a bus accident, which was pretty horrible. One of the students lost their life, and Kendra was in that accident, and there was a lot of just like physical pain, but also emotional trauma. And one really difficult thing, I think, was that you were far away from home. So you came back to school, but then you're not with your family. And so how are we going to take care of you and make sure you're okay when you have a lot of back problems and there just was a whole rigmarole of stuff, right? So you came to stay with me. But I don't know, like from your perception, did that pull you closer to the AC community? Did it cause separation? How did you make sense of all of that in terms of like, I'm at the school and this thing has happened to me, and what it means about your relationship with the school and the community?
Yes. At first it was unsettling because I think I kept getting lost in the crowd of people because I was not supposed to be on the trip because I wasn't an agricultural major, but I had interned at the children's home that summer. And so I asked if I could go along. And so they were like, yeah, you can go along. So I was like the missing person, I didn't belong on the bus, essentially.
Yeah.
And so I remember them, like they spelled my name wrong when I was like signing in. I was like, oh, that's not how you spell my name, but okay. So I got in. And so I think some people didn't realize that it was me at first.
Yeah.
From my understanding. And I didn't know what was happening. Honestly, I feel like a lot of things were just going on and I was just kind of in the middle of it. I think it was very good that I had you and Roxanne and them came down to visit, and I guess together as we made the decision for me to stay with you and not drive back to like the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because I think it would have been like a hard drive to go back, and also like I was still in school. And I think had I gone back to Dallas, I probably would have been out a lot longer than when I was out, most likely. So I felt like a sense of like community in the fact that they were trying to figure out like where every student was. I remember the president came and I think I was like strapped down to the bed, and he came and like held my hand. I like was in and out. So I remember his face being there, but then I was like, maybe that was a dream. I don't know if that really happened.
Yeah, you guys became best friends, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Phil Schubert became Philly to Kendra, and she would holler out for him every time she saw him on campus. But it did seem like it was a community, like you felt cared for by the community.
Yes, absolutely.
In that piece.
I think in just the beginning of me not being like part of the agriculture part, I would get lost in just like the communication sometimes. But as far as like the community as a whole, I very much felt like the whole city was like really supportive during that time.
Which is, you know, Matt, you and I always talk about kind of this recovery piece where something bad happens, and then the outcome of that can be that you draw your students closer, that you articulate their importance to your community, that you care for them, and that it actually cements their connection instead of it being an alienating, off-putting experience. But you have to be super intentional about that. You can't just like, oh, well, we'll see what happens, right?
I think there's a couple of things, Kendra, when I think about that experience that you had. For me, that's where I started to see you become a stronger self-advocate, and through that process. And I think for sure that just the relationship that you pursued, that relationship with Dr. Schubert, and really built that and saw another person that I want to add to my team, but in all of that coming through that shock factor, having community, but coming through that, I saw you as a stronger person. And I think for you, understanding your role in the community, that really came out in that. At least that's how I saw the way that you as an outcome of that experience.
Yeah, he definitely helped with that, because I think he met with each one of us individually. And at first I was like, this isn't real. And then we had like the conversation, and he was very like relaxed, and it was just like comfortable, like easygoing. And I asked him, can I call him Philly? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And then I got nervous to like even ask him, like to do it out in public. Like people think I'm crazy. And then somebody told me like he was waiting for me to say it, and I did. And I was like, okay, next time I promise I'm gonna do it. And then I did, and people were like, well, I was like, yeah, that's me. Me and him are on that level.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I love that, Kendra. And one thing that I'm seeing, so kind of transitioning off of Kendra's story, right now in the middle of COVID, the schools where the president is visiting students during quarantine. I just did a Spark retention analysis where their persistence of students who were being in quarantine, COVID quarantine, and tracked in our system actually was higher than their average, because of the way that they were, exactly what you're saying, kind of how COVID can be a shock factor too. So that to say for our listeners, the role in all of these things, students are going to have shock factors happen during their freshman year in particular. There's a lot of things as they're making that transition, there's factors, but throughout their college experience, if you're paying attention, you have an opportunity to really not only support them, but help bring out in them, just like Dr. Schubert did, and that relationship, and bringing out that self-agency where you have more confidence in being able to speak up.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, Kendra, I want to give you the last word. Is there anything that you want to say about your college experience? So you graduated successfully, passed your nursing classes, have had good jobs, you're making it in life. Is there anything that you want to say about your college experience before we're done?
Let me think. I think mostly it's the community. Like I saw people that I felt like could help me bring out parts of me that I didn't know that I had in me. And it was like a vibe that I got. And I invested in those people and like wanted to spend my time with them and showed interest in them. And so that really helped me be successful in school, which is kind of building that community and trusting the people that they have my best interest at heart and things of that nature. So it's definitely like a team effort for sure.
I mean, what's funny to me is your academics, we never were worried that you weren't going to be successful academically, right? Because you're a hard worker and you're smart. And all of the places that you worked super hard were about student development, about growing as a person and knowing yourself better and growing new skills, and just, I mean, just so much growth that laid the foundation for then the last 5 years where you've been really successful. So I'm always very proud of you. I'm grateful for any slice of that story you let me have, but I'm always saying, like, you are the hero, you're the winner, like you did all that stuff. And I just got to kind of walk along and be like, be careful, or or don't trip on that, right? But your success and your grit and resiliency in saying, like, I'm going to do this thing, and when I graduate, not only am I going to have the academic certification, but I also am going to have grown as a person into a great adult, is awesome. So,
Well, you are great, Kendra.
Thank you.
you are great.
Thank you for joining us and helping
Absolutely.
us just talk more about that experience that you had and the role of community in that, and the role of being on the other side, a person who a first generation college student can trust and add to their team. So really appreciate your reflection of that, all of that time.
Thank you guys for joining us. We will be back next week again with Anthony Malcurie to talk more about sense of belonging. Hope you have a great week, and we look forward to spending more time with you. Thanks. Bye.